Carson looked me dead in the eye through that video call and said, "Look, if you don't like the new policies, Mac, you can just resign and find somewhere that appreciates legacy thinking." That's when I knew this 28-year-old trust fund kid had just made the biggest mistake of his short corporate life. My name's Marcus Henderson, Mac to everyone who matters, and at 52 years old, I thought I'd seen every power play in the defense contracting world. 25 years since my Navy discharge, worked my way up from junior programmer to senior cybersecurity engineer at Apex Defense Technologies here in Austin. Built encryption systems that kept our soldiers safe overseas, designed protocols that made foreign hackers think twice about targeting American infrastructure. But Carson Wade, VP of Innovation and son of our CEO, had other plans for my life. It started that Monday morning when he called the all-hands meeting. Carson was broadcasting from the Dallas corporate office, that permanent smirk on his face like someone who thought an MBA from Stanford counted as combat experience. Hair too perfect for someone supposedly responsible for national security contracts, voice carrying that entitled tone they teach in business school. "We're implementing operational alignment for next-generation teams," he announced, clicking to a slide that looked like it was designed by a marketing intern. "Full-time on-site collaboration starts next week. No exceptions." People stared at their screens. I felt my jaw tighten because for 18 months straight, my quantum encryption project had exceeded every Department of Defense benchmark they'd thrown at us. And I did most of that work from my home office, same place where I'd been stationed since my wife Sarah started her cancer treatments. But apparently results mattered less than Carson's need to justify his corner office. Then came the real sucker punch. All research and development prototypes, plus any classified development work, must be logged in our centralized security repository. Full source files, technical documentation, access credentials. My office will review all intellectual property for patent consolidation and contract optimization. That's when my Navy training kicked in. 25 years of corporate life, but some instincts never fade. I recognized a hostile takeover when I saw one. This wasn't about security compliance. This was theft with a paper trail. "Carson," I said, unmuting my microphone with the calm I'd learned diffusing situations in the Persian Gulf, "does this policy apply to projects developed outside standard contract parameters?" He actually smiled wider. "Mac, anything relevant to Apex Defense's strategic roadmap falls under company purview. Even work done with no company equipment, time, or personnel. Honestly, your encryption stuff is probably too complex for our current initiatives anyway." He leaned back in his chair like he was explaining basic math to a child. "Once it's integrated into our systems, it becomes company property. That's how defense contracting works." The conference call went silent. Even Tommy, my 24-year-old mentee who still asks me how to configure SSL certificates, stopped typing. Carson had just admitted, on a recorded company call, that he planned to steal independent work and claim it as corporate property. "And me?" I smiled back at that camera. "Thanks for clarifying the exit strategy, Carson." I closed my laptop, unplugged my secure terminal, and stood up from my desk. 25 years of corporate politics had taught me when to fight and when to execute a strategic withdrawal. This was definitely execution time. I walked out of that building like I was heading to the hardware store for weekend supplies. No drama, no shouting, just a cardboard box in my arms and the 1,000-yard stare I'd perfected during my military service. Colleagues whispered as I passed. Tommy caught up to me at the elevator, his face pale like someone processing a system failure. "Mac, what's happening? Where are you going?" I looked at him steadily. "Stay, observe, document everything." The elevator doors closed before he could respond. Outside, Austin's October heat hit me like a wall, but I felt cooler than I had in months. I loaded my personal items into my F-150's toolbox, right next to a pre-sealed envelope I'd prepared weeks ago. The address label read, Colonel Sam Bull Hartwell, Department of Defense Inspector General's Office. Inside that envelope wasn't a resignation letter. It was documentation proving that the next-generation quantum encryption protocol Carson's team was preparing for the Air Force contract belonged to me. Not morally, not theoretically, but legally and federally mine. See, I'd been building it for the past 11 months, entirely outside my Apex Defense contract scope. Nights, weekends, my own hardware, my own funding. Every line of code time-stamped and witnessed, every development milestone documented with the precision they'd taught me in the Navy. Carson thought he could intimidate me into surrender, that I'd slink away like a good little employee with bruised feelings and half-finished LinkedIn updates. But Carson had never served in the military. He'd never learned that the most dangerous enemy is the one who's had time to prepare for battle while you're still figuring out there's a war. I drove straight to the downtown post office and hand-delivered that envelope to Federal Mail. White, standard issue, sealed with the kind of attention to detail that had kept me alive in hostile waters and would now keep Carson awake at night. Then I called Kevin Reeves, my old college buddy who'd transitioned from JAG officer to intellectual property attorney. "Kevin, it's Mac. Time to activate the contingency plan." "Roger that. How bad did they step in it?" "Carson just claimed ownership of classified protocols on a recorded company call." Long pause. "Jesus, Mac. He really doesn't know who he's messing with, does he?" "Not yet, but he's about to get a federal education." 20 minutes later, I was sitting in Kevin's office while he reviewed documentation that would make Pentagon lawyers proud. Development logs, witness statements, federal filing confirmations, all proving my encryption protocols existed months before Carson ever knew they were possible. "Mac," Kevin said, setting down the last folder, "this isn't just airtight. This is submarine-grade sealed. Good. Because Carson's about to discover that stealing from a Navy veteran with security clearance isn't a career move, it's a career-ending move." I smiled. That's the plan. The next morning, I didn't show up for work. Instead, I was sitting in a downtown diner at 6 a.m., sketching encryption algorithms on napkins while a waitress named Betty kept my coffee cup full without asking. This wasn't the first time I'd done this. The original concept for my quantum encryption protocol was born in this same booth 11 months ago, right next to a half-eaten stack of pancakes and the realization that Apex Defense was heading for a management disaster. I'd seen Carson coming long before he officially arrived. His daddy had been dropping hints about bringing fresh perspectives to legacy operations for months. Translation: some Stanford MBA kid was going to parachute in and start fixing things that weren't broken. So I'd started preparing. Every weekend for nearly a year, I'd been building something Carson couldn't steal because Carson would never know it existed. My personal laptop, my personal network, my personal time. Zero connection to Apex defense systems. I called it Ghost Protocol because it moved data so quietly even system administrators would miss it. The beautiful part? Carson's new intellectual property policy, designed to give executives more control, had actually created a legal loophole big enough to drive a tank through. In his rush to consolidate power, he'd specifically exempted employee-developed technology created without company resources during non-contracted hours. He probably thought that clause was meaningless. After all, who develops military-grade encryption in their spare time? A Navy veteran with 25 years of experience and a sick wife who needs insurance coverage. That's who. My phone buzzed with a text from Tommy. "Carson's asking where you are. What should I tell him?" I typed back, "Tell him I'm consulting federal documentation." 20 minutes later, Kevin Reeves walked into the diner looking like a man who'd just reviewed evidence in a war crimes trial. He slid into the booth across from me and set a thick folder on the table. "Mac, I've been practicing IP law for 15 years. I've never seen documentation this thorough. Navy taught me to prepare for the worst-case scenario. Your worst-case scenario is about to become Carson's nightmare." Kevin opened the folder. 3 provisional patents filed under the Defense Production Act. Quantum encryption engine, adaptive threat response protocol, and your Ghost protocol. System. All registered to Marcus A. Henderson, private citizen. Timeline clean? Cleaner than a submarine engine room. Your first Git commit predates Carson's arrival at Apex Defense by 4 months. Your federal filing predates their Dominion project announcement by 6 weeks. Dominion. That's what they were calling the system they'd stolen from me. Carson had announced it during last week's quarterly review, describing it as revolutionary cybersecurity architecture that will redefine military communications. Revolutionary. Right. Like calling a stolen car innovative transportation. Kevin, what happens when they try to demonstrate Dominion publicly? Without your core protocols? System failure. Catastrophic, embarrassing, career-ending system failure. And if they try to rebuild without my code? Impossible. Your encryption algorithms are integrated into every security layer. Remove them, and the entire framework collapses. Perfect. My phone rang. Sarah's name on the screen. "Hey, sweetheart. How's the treatment going? Good day today. Nurse says my numbers are improving. Her voice sounded stronger than it had in weeks. Mac, Tommy called the house looking for you. Said something about Carson being upset? Nothing to worry about, just some corporate politics. You didn't do anything crazy, did you? I looked across the table at Kevin, who was organizing legal documents that would destroy Carson's career. Define crazy. Marcus Henderson, what did you do? I protected our family's future, and I did it legally. Long pause. Should I be worried? About Carson? No. About paying for Emma's college tuition? Also no. After I hung up, Kevin leaned forward. Mac, there's something else. I've been tracking Apex Defense's contract obligations. They've got a demonstration scheduled for the Defense Technology Summit in 3 weeks. Let me guess. Dominion's the star of the show, main attraction. DoD procurement officers, defense journalists, the works. Carson's betting his entire career on a successful public launch. How public? Live streamed to the entire defense industry. If Dominion fails during that demonstration, Carson's finished. Worse than finished. He'll be radioactive. No defense contractor will touch him after a failure that public. I sipped my coffee and thought about the ghost protocol sitting on my personal server, every line of code legally protected and completely inaccessible to Apex Defense. Kevin, how long do we have before they realize they can't make Dominion work based on their development timeline? They'll hit the critical failure point in about 10 days, right when they're supposed to be finalizing the demonstration, and there's no way they can reverse engineer my work. Not without triggering federal compliance alerts. Your protocols are protected under classified technology statutes. Any attempt to access or reproduce them without authorization becomes a federal crime. So Carson has 2 choices. Admit he stole classified technology or watch his career implode on live television. Those are his options. I stood up, left a $10 tip for Betty, and shook Kevin's hand. Keep monitoring their progress. I want to know the exact moment they realize they're screwed. Where are you going? Home. To spend time with my wife and make sure our daughter's college fund is secure. Mac, aren't you curious about how this plays out? I smiled. Kevin, I spent 8 years in the Navy. I know the difference between being on a submarine and watching one sink from a safe distance. And which one are you doing now? I'm on dry land with a life jacket. Carson's the one underwater. As I walked to my truck, my phone buzzed with another message from Tommy. Carson called an emergency engineering meeting. Says we need to accelerate Dominion timeline. Everyone's freaking out. I typed back, document everything. And Tommy, update your resume. The next 10 days were going to be very interesting. Day 7 before the Defense Technology Summit, Tommy started sending me updates that read like a disaster movie script. Carson's pulling 16-hour days. Brought in 3 outside contractors. Everyone's walking on eggshells. Day 5. Encryption modules keep throwing error codes. Carson keeps saying, just make it work, but nobody knows how. Day 3. They're talking about canceling the demo. Carson locked himself in the conference room for 2 hours today. Day 1. Mac, this is bad. Really bad. I was sitting on my back porch that Thursday evening, watching Sarah tend her garden while Emma called from college to complain about her organic chemistry professor. Normal family stuff, the kind of evening Carson's corporate chaos couldn't touch. My phone rang. Kevin, Mac, they just filed an emergency patent application. For what? Dominion. They're claiming it as original Apex Defense intellectual property. I almost laughed. How's that going to work out for them? About as well as you'd expect. Federal Patent Office flagged it immediately. Conflict with existing protected technology. Your technology. So what happens now? Their application gets rejected. But here's the interesting part. Filing a false patent claim on classified technology? That's not just civil court anymore, Mac. That's federal prosecution territory. Friday morning, the day before the summit, I got a call from Colonel Sam Bull Hartwell. We'd served together briefly in the Gulf back when he was just another Navy lieutenant with opinions about proper protocol maintenance. Mac, I've been reviewing your documentation. This is some impressive work. Thank you, sir. Also some impressive preparation. You've been planning this for a while, since the day I realized Carson was going to steal everything I'd built. Son, I've got to ask, did you leave any breadcrumbs? Any way for Apex Defense to make this work without your protocols? Sir, with respect, that would defeat the purpose. So when they try to demonstrate this system tomorrow, it'll fail. Completely. in front of DoD procurement officers and defense journalists, and their competitors, and anyone else Carson invited to watch his moment of glory. Long pause. Mac, I've seen a lot of careers end in my time, but I've never seen someone dig their own grave this thoroughly. Carson did the digging, sir. I just handed him the shovel. Saturday morning, the Austin Convention Center. I wasn't supposed to be there, but I'd bought a general admission pass under the name M.A. Henderson. Sometimes you need to watch your handiwork up close. Apex Defense had booth 207, center stage, directly across from two competitors showcasing next-generation military encryption. The same field Dominion was supposedly going to revolutionize. Carson arrived in a tailored suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. He was flanked by Tommy, two senior engineers, and a marketing specialist who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. They wheeled in branded displays, demonstration hardware, and a live demo setup loaded with what they thought was the Dominion system. I positioned myself 3 rows back, wearing a baseball cap and the kind of anonymity that comes with being 52 and invisible to people like Carson. The morning sessions dragged on, presentations about next-generation warfare, cybersecurity challenges, emerging threats, standard defense industry material, but everyone was waiting for the afternoon demonstrations. At 2 p.m., Carson took the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, today, Apex Defense Technologies will demonstrate the future of military cybersecurity. Confident, polished, completely unaware that his career was about to crater in front of 300 industry professionals. Dominion represents a quantum leap in encryption technology, real-time threat assessment, adaptive security protocols, and autonomous defense capabilities that will revolutionize how we protect our nation's communications. The audience clapped politely. A few people took notes. Carson gestured toward the large screen behind him. Now we'll show you Dominion in action, live, real-time against simulated enemy attacks. The demonstration began. For about 30 seconds, it looked impressive. The interface loaded. System diagnostics ran. Numbers cascaded across the screen like something from a Hollywood movie. Then my ghost protocol kicked in. Actually, it didn't kick in. That was the problem. The system tried to access core encryption functions that weren't there anymore. Functions I'd removed when I left Apex Defense. Functions that were now protected under federal law and completely inaccessible to Carson's team. The screen froze. Error messages started popping up. Authentication failure. Core protocols not found. System integrity compromised. Tommy, visible in the wings, lunged toward the demonstration laptop. His fingers flew across the keyboard, but there was nothing to fix. The encryption engine wasn't malfunctioning. It simply didn't exist. Carson tried to stay composed. "We're experiencing some technical difficulties," he announced, his voice slightly higher than normal. The audience shifted in their seats. A few people checked their phones. Someone in the press section started typing rapidly. Then the backup systems failed, because there were no backup systems, just empty code shells where my protocols used to live. "Authentication error," announced the system's computerized voice, loud enough for the entire auditorium to hear, unable to locate security parameters. Carson's face went pale. He looked toward Tommy, who was shaking his head frantically. Looked toward the senior engineers, who were staring at their laptops like the screens might spontaneously generate missing code. "I'm sorry," Carson said finally. "We'll need to postpone this demonstration." Scattered, uncomfortable applause, the kind you hear at Little League games when a kid strikes out badly. But the real show was just beginning. As Carson walked off the stage, a man in dress blues approached the Apex Defense booth, Colonel Hartwell carrying a manila envelope that contained everything Carson didn't know he didn't know. "Mr. Wade?" "Colonel Sam Hartwell, DoD Inspector General's office. We need to talk." Carson's expression shifted from embarrassment to confusion to the beginning of genuine fear. "Is there somewhere private we can discuss your company's intellectual property claims?" That's when Carson realized this wasn't just a failed demonstration. This was the beginning of the end. The conference room at the Austin Convention Center was small, windowless, and about to become the location where Carson Wade's career died a very public death. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I didn't need to. I could see everything through the glass partition. Colonel Hartwell spreading documents across the table, Carson's face shifting from confusion to denial to the pale realization that he'd stepped into something far bigger than a failed product demo. 20 minutes later, Carson emerged looking like a man who'd just received terminal diagnosis from his doctor. Colonel Hartwell followed, carried himself with the bearing of someone who'd just completed an unpleasant but necessary duty. Tommy intercepted Carson near the booth. I was close enough to catch fragments of their conversation. "Sir, what did he want? Get everyone packed up, now!" "The demonstration equipment? Leave it. We're done here." Within an hour, the Apex Defense booth was empty. Carson and his team disappeared like smoke, leaving behind branded banners and a demonstration rig that would never run Dominion again. My phone buzzed. Text from Kevin. "Federal warrant executed at Apex Defense headquarters 30 minutes ago. FBI seized all servers related to Dominion project." I smiled and headed for the parking garage. 3 days later, the news broke. Austin Business Journal ran the headline, "Defense contractor under federal investigation for IP theft." The article was brief but devastating. Anonymous sources confirmed that Apex Defense Technologies was being investigated for unauthorized use of classified encryption technology. The company's security clearances were under review. Several major contracts had been suspended pending investigation. Carson's name appeared in paragraph 3, VP of Innovation. Carson Wade could not be reached for comment. Could not be reached. In corporate speak, that meant he'd been disappeared. No forwarding address, no transition period, just gone. Tommy called me that afternoon. "Mac, can we meet? I need advice." We met at the same diner where Kevin and I had planned Carson's downfall. Tommy looked like he'd aged 5 years in 3 days. "Carson's gone," he said without preamble. "Security cleared out his office yesterday. HR says he's pursuing other opportunities." "What about the rest of the team?" "Scattered. Half the engineering department got laid off. The other half got reassigned to maintenance projects." Tommy stirred his coffee absently. "Mac, can I ask you something?" "Shoot. Did you know this was going to happen?" I looked at him across the table. Good kid, smart, hardworking, deserved better than to get caught in Carson's blast radius. "Tommy, what do you think?" "I think Carson messed with the wrong guy." "And what are you going to do with that information?" "Keep my mouth shut and update my resume." Smart kid. 6 weeks later, I was walking into Blackwater Dynamics headquarters in San Antonio, wearing a badge that read Marcus A. Henderson, Chief Security Officer. The building was all reinforced glass and clean angles, designed to look like the future of defense technology. Blackwater hadn't just wanted my encryption protocols. They wanted my methodology, my experience, my 25-year track record of building systems that kept Americans safe. They offered me my own security clearance level, a team of 12 hand-picked engineers, and a compensation package that made Sarah laugh when I told her the numbers. "That's more than we've made in the past 3 years combined," she said. Her latest cancer screening had come back clean. The treatment was working. It's enough to cover Emma's graduate school, too. "What about Carson? Ever hear what happened to him?" I pulled up the LinkedIn notification I'd received that morning. He's selling insurance in Plano. Profile says former technology executive seeking new challenges in customer relations. From VP of Innovation to insurance salesman. That's quite a fall. He chose his own landing. My first week at Blackwater, I implemented new intellectual property protection protocols. Every engineer got training on federal compliance requirements. Every project got triple documentation. Every line of code got time-stamped and archived. "Why so thorough?" asked Dr. Rebecca Martinez, Blackwater's Chief Technology Officer. "Because I've seen what happens when people try to steal what doesn't belong to them. The Apex Defense situation, among others." She nodded. "We heard about that. Word is someone really did their homework. Preparation beats improvisation every time. Military training, life training." 3 months into my new job, Tommy contacted me. He'd landed a position with a small cybersecurity firm in Denver. Good company, good prospects, far away from the smoking crater that used to be Apex Defense. "Mac, I wanted to thank you." "For what?" "For showing me what it looks like when someone fights back the right way." "What do you mean?" "You could have made it personal, could have destroyed Carson publicly, humiliated him, ruined his life for spite. Instead, you just let the system work." "Tommy, I didn't destroy Carson. Carson destroyed Carson. I just documented the process." "Still, that took discipline." "Maybe it did. Or maybe I was just too old for revenge fantasies." At 52, with a wife recovering from cancer and a daughter finishing college, I didn't have time for drama. I had time for results. And the results spoke for themselves. Carson was gone, my family was secure, and my ghost protocol was now classified at the highest levels of government security. The Pentagon wanted 3 more versions. Emma's tuition was covered through graduate school. Sarah's medical bills were handled through executive health coverage. Every morning when I walk into Blackwater Dynamics, past the American flag and the photos of real heroes, I remember that moment when Carson told me to resign. Best career advice I ever received. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's getting ahead. Thanks for listening, corporate warriors. Remember, document everything, trust nobody, and always have an exit strategy. Unless you're my old boss, then you're on your own.